The purpose of this video is to review over the various anatomical structures associated with the human brain. Notice that there are two models present. We will begin with the external structures of the brain, and we will move our study to the internal structures. Beginning on the external structures of the brain, as we move forward, the first thing we will notice is that there are these grooves that are located on the brain. And these various grooves that we see all through the brain are called the sulci. We also have these ridged or these raised portions of the brain, and those are called the gyri. When we look at the brain, we will notice the large cerebral hemispheres, both on each side, and then on the side we will see the smaller cerebellum. As we continue on the ventral surface of the brain, there we go, some structures that we will notice is that we have the pituitary gland right here. Now with that pituitary gland that is attached to the brain through a small stalk right here called the infundibulum, this pituitary gland rests on the sella turcica located on the internal structures of the skull. Moving backwards, we will have our pons, our medulla oblongata, and when it thins out, we have the spinal cord. Spinning this around so that we can begin at the front part of the brain, we have 12 cranial nerves associated with the brain. And as we get a closer view of the brain, you will notice that they are indicated with various Roman numerals. Now as we begin through, we will start with the olfactory nerve, which is cranial nerve 1. Anytime we have a nerve that leaves the brain, it is known as a tract. So this location right in here is known as the olfactory tract, ending in the olfactory bulb. There will be various small extensions that will proceed off of the olfactory bulb. They will pass through the olfactory foramina of the ethmoid bone of the skull and then continue downward into the nose so that one can smell. Moving back, we run across our next cranial nerve. Notice that on this nerve we have an X cross. Again, when we have a nerve that leaves the brain, it's known as a tract. So we have our olfactory tract located on this side, as well as this other side underneath the pituitary gland. The area where the tract meets and we have the cross is known as the optic chiasma. That is a structure we will also see on the internal of the brain. We'll see a cross section of this. And then from the olfactory, from the optic chiasma forward on this location and this location, we will see the optic nerve. So as we look at the various cranial nerves of the body, again there are 12 cranial nerves in the human brain, and they are indicated by Roman numerals. Beginning at the front, we have our olfactory, we have our ocular. Moving on down, right here we have our ocular motor. Then we have our trochlear. We shift this over, and after trochlear we have our trigeminal. And then we move to cranial nerve 6, which is the abducen. From cranial nerve 6 we move to our facial. Then we move to the auditory or the vestibular cochlear. Now we saw a section of this on the ear on our ear model. From the vestibular cochlear we then move to cranial nerve number 9, which is located right here, and that's the glossopharyngeal. Cranial nerve 10 is the vagus. Cranial nerve 11 is the spinal accessory. Cranial nerve 12 is the hypoglossal. Now if you ever need to learn these cranial nerves, a nice mnemonic device that would help you is on old Olympus towering top, a fin and germ viewed some hop. And that corresponds, if you number that out, that's 12 words, corresponds to the 12 cranial nerves: olfactory, optic, ocular motor, trochlear, trigeminal, abducen, facial, auditory, glossopharyngeal, vagus, spinal accessory, and hypoglossal. In addition to knowing the cranial nerves, many times you are required to know whether they are a sensory nerve, such as the optic and the olfactory, Are they a motor nerve, or do they function in both? And a mnemonic device for this would be, my brother says bad business, marry money. And when we can look at this, reading through that, the M's would be motor, the S's would be sensory, and the B's would be both. So from beginning to end, starting with the olfactory one, we would go, some say marry money, but my brother says bad business, marry money. So as we move through that, we would see the olfactory is sensory, the optic is sensory, ocular motor is motor, trochlear is motor, trigeminal has both functions, abducens is motor, facial has both, auditory is sensory, glossopharyngeal is both, vagus has both, spinal accessory and hypoglossal are motor. And so that mnemonic device would help you to identify motor, sensory, or both, and the 12 cranial nerves of the body. Now let's take this and look at a cross-section of the brain. And we're going to pop the brain apart, and we will see the structures on both sides. We will span that out. The only difference that we will see is that on this particular model, located right here, we will have the pituitary gland located with the infundibulum, where on this model the pituitary gland is missing. Now if we move this up and we look at this model right here, we will see the pituitary gland right here in pink with the infundibulum. So the very structures we are about to go over will also be seen on this as well. So we look at and we see the cerebellum, and then we see our various internal structures where we will have our septum pellucidum, fornix, corpus callosum within this area. So here's where we go. The top is the corpus callosum, the slit is the septum pellucidum, the bottom is the fornix. If we move over to the cerebellum, the branches we see in the cerebellum are called the arba vitrae. This structure right here of the brain is called the corpora quadrigemina. Moving over, we will see our pineal body, which is an endocrine gland. We will see our thalamus area. Let's see, what other structures can we show you? Actually, this is the pineal body. I'm holding and recording at the same time. That's the pineal body. This right here is just part of the fornix. So pituitary gland, pineal body, corpora quadrigemina, arba vitrae, corpus callosum, septum pellucidum, fornix, thalamus area. Moving down, we will have our pons in that area, moving down into our medulla oblongata, moving down into the spinal cord. And if we shift over to this model, again we'll see the same structures where we have our corpus callosum located here, the septum pellucidum, the bottom part here being number 26, or in red, fornix. Moving over, we will see our pituitary gland with the infundibulum, and then we're going to notice this structure right there. Now that structure right there is the optic chiasma, or the crossing of the two optic tracts to make the optic nerves. Additional structures that we will look at is, if we move over, and this is the opposite side of the model above. So on this particular model right there is the pineal body. Again, if we shift over to this model, we'll see the same structures, but we'll see the pineal body located on this side. Okay. Again, an overview for you to look at. One of the things you will need to be aware of as you study this model is which side are we looking at. Okay.